This is It with Library Card, and today I'll be talking about Jonathan Haidt's book, The Righteous Mind. But I'm not going to talk about the whole book, because I feel that show would go on for an hour or more. I take notes on books and sort of divide it up on what I would think would be a good angle or an interesting angle on a book. I have about 50 different interesting angles and things I've noticed about the book. So I would say this is probably going to kick off a new series of me talking about one book and the relation to other books that it is suggested and talked about. So this book gave me a ton of great ideas for shows, and I'm really excited about it. So if you haven't gotten it yet, I'm absolutely recommending this book. This will be the first time in the show I tell you should buy this book. But I'll continue to tell you throughout the show how great of a book this is and how it should be on every bookshelf. The thing is, I wanted to say how excited I was that this is the first library book I've done in a while. I actually got this book from the library, and it was so good that I then had to buy a copy so I could make notes and reread different sections. It's just an awesome book, and it will make you understand things like why you feel different than someone else, the way politics and religion is tied to morality, and how we form our moral beliefs. It's one also I think everyone should read because of sort of what's going on in the country with our disagreements and how a lot of people from both sides of the aisle look at the people opposite them with a disgust or hatred, and I don't think that's very good for the country and society as a whole. And this book really helps you understand why people think and feel differently than you on issues that you have such a solid moral footing on that you think, how could someone else ever disagree with me? So I'll say the book is just a nice sort of a reminder to treat everyone like human beings and try to listen more than explain to people. But so I would recommend going out and reading this book. I am just going to talk about really the first part of the book and what I found so interesting about it. So the big part of the book, and sort of an analogy that Jonathan Haidt sets up in the beginning of the book and then uses throughout the book, is that we are riders on elephants. And what he means is the rider, the person on top of the elephant, is sort of our rational mind, and the elephant is our emotional and intuitional. I don't think intuitional is a word. The mind of intuition is the elephant that drives us. Where this is most present is during moral decisions and arguments. A lot of our morality, I think we'd like to believe a lot of our morality is something that we've reasoned. We've thought about why we feel the way we do about certain issues, and that's why we feel that way, because we've done such a good job of reasoning, because we're so smart that we can really figure out nuanced arguments about everything. Where it's probably more a feeling we have towards one way or the other. Our moral decisions are more based on an intuition. It's the elephant sort of going in that direction, and the rider justifying it, saying, this is where I want it to go, this is where I always want it to go, this is how I want it to go, when the elephant's actually driving. And I would say this is one of the things that you really get from the book, and it helps you navigate your daily life, is I think a lot of us think that we are, in using this analogy, expanding it out, that we're riders on horses. And horses are quick to make good decisions, and they're easy to steer. But if rationality is the rider, then we are more riding elephants. And acknowledging that you're riding an elephant can help you understand why you feel the way you do. It gives you the ability to know how to course correct, because you can course correct really quick with a horse, but you can't with an elephant. And so you have to understand if you have something you're unsure of, like an issue you're unsure of, and your initial reaction is to go in one direction, that doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong, but if you know you're steering an elephant, that it's going to be hard now to look at things the other way, but being able to nudge your elephant in little ways to get yourself heading in a different direction, or at least acknowledging that the elephant is going in that direction, and maybe that's the best direction to go. I'm sorry this analogy gets a little convoluted, but basically the best thing this book does is point out that even though you think your rationality is why you have your moral beliefs, it's probably more intuition. And if you can acknowledge that and accept that, then you can have a better understanding of why you believe what you believe and why other people think differently than you. So the other things that are really fun in the beginning of the book, it starts to go away at the end, is Jonathan Haidt's little social experiments as far as how he sets up tests and all that. And the beginning of the book is really great for setting up what social psychologists do, what kind of questions they ask, and how they set up tests. The two he starts out with are interesting, and they ask about morality, and basically it's when a family's dog dies and they eat it. Is that morally wrong? No one sees the dog die, and they ask these questions, and then they sort of set up different experiments around it. The other one, the one that's a little weirder, is a man every Friday night buys a chicken, has sex with the chicken, and then cooks it. And Jonathan Haidt and his researchers ask these questions in different scenarios with different people. And so I love the setup of social experiments because they're so interesting. And there's a certain anything goes and how outrageous can you be and what kind of questions you ask and how the questions are crafted. So if you're interested in psychology and more so social psychology, this book is just chock full of goodness. And again, especially in the beginning of the book, he breaks down how he does his research, how the research is supposed to be properly done, where the research is done. Like I was thinking, one of the things he did was he went to Penn, and when he went to Penn for his graduate program, this is where he designed it, and I'm talking about Jonathan Haidt here. This is where he started to design his questions about morality. And it was just funny hearing him talk about Penn's campus, which I live outside of Philadelphia, so I know a little bit of Penn's campus, and then the neighborhood surrounding Penn's campus. And it is like two very different worlds, and how he would get such different answers, and how then if you take that around the world, how you get different answers, and how morality is formed. So just his ability to explain the experiments and show how he adjusted for all sorts of different beliefs and how he adjusted for just different variables to try to get a purer number is really interesting. And again, if you like social psychology and are interested in those sort of experiments, it's just a terrific read. And the last thing I just want to push, because there's one case study that I found the most interesting, and this is that morality is mostly intuition. What I like about the book is Jonathan, like we're best friends. Dr. Haidt, I believe he's a doctor, doesn't moralize about it. Like, morality is mostly intuition, and you're wrong that your morality is mostly intuition. It's sort of like morality is mostly intuition. You should recognize that about yourself, and then you should recognize it about other people, and just understand that about someone. And it helps you if you want to persuade them a different way to sort of recognize that morality is mostly intuition and that you can't always rationalize it away. Oh, and the case study was about people who had some sort of damage to the part of the brain where intuition comes from. And yeah, there's a part of the brain that intuition comes from, and that they had so much trouble making decisions, and that they made, like 50% of the time, they made wrong decisions. So they were basically just left with their rationality. Now, these are people with brain damage, and I don't think it's as clear-cut as he says, but it is an interesting sort of thought experiment of like a being that just relies on rationality. You think of like a Spock, and that it actually makes people's lives way harder, and they make more poor decisions because intuition is a shortcut. Like, we make millions of decisions a day. Probably not that many, but we make a lot of decisions during the day. And we need to make them quick. And intuition is like a shortcut. And there are certain decisions we stop and think about. But if you had to stop and think about all the decisions you made, you would go crazy. And that's what happened in a lot of these cases. So again, this book is amazing. This is not going to be the last show I'm doing on this book. Pick it up, buy it, read it. It's so good. Jonathan Haidt has written other books. He wrote one with a guy named Greg Lukianoff called The Coddling of the American Mind. It's also a very brilliant book. He makes his books are very scientific, and I think someone who is academic and even in social psychology could get a lot from it. But an idiot like me also just pulled so much interesting things, and it really gave me a new way to look at life and look at other people. So again, I cannot recommend this book enough. The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. Pick it up at your local library, but probably like me, and again, I mean, you should be using your library. Libraries are great. You're probably going to buy it. You might want to cut out the middleman, skip the library, and just go buy this book, because it is great. It's an older book, so it's not super expensive, and a lot of other people think it's great. So if you don't take an idiot with the library card's word for it, look on the internet, check them out. And that is the other thing. Oh, sorry, the last little addendum to the show is Jonathan Haidt is also great on YouTube. He does a ton of interviews. He does TED Talks. Look him up on YouTube and watch one of his talks. If I didn't convince you to buy this book, I think one of his talks, especially about the Righteous Mind, will have you on Amazon buying his book. So thanks for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment wherever you get your podcasts. We have a YouTube channel now, so you can subscribe over there. It literally is this podcast with pictures I put over on Movie Maker. It's not great, but if you like to listen to your stuff on YouTube, and hey, if you want to look at the few pictures I pick for every podcast, that could be fun for you too. So thanks for all your support, and I hope to be putting out a new show shortly, probably about Jonathan Haidt's book.